Our Friday edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours is our open Q&A session where we don't really have any set agenda. Just basically, if you have any questions about Trailhead, super badges you're going through, you have an issue at work, you're stuck on something, whatever it is, Salesforce technology related, you come here, raise your hand using the icon that should be in your toolbar down there, and we go through and we'll answer questions. Now, that being said, before we get started today, I'm actually going to start with something different, and I'm actually going to go through an acoustic rendition of Other Side by the Red Hot Chili. No, I'm not going to do that. You guys kidding me? I barely have the guts to get on this call, let alone sing in front of people. So let's, all right. So yes, let's open it up for questions. Anthony, I see you have a hand up.
Yep, I want to share my screen. I am trying to build out the portfolios and share my screen. I have one where it looks great. I had these little. You guys see my screen?
Yes. Oh, that does look great. Nice.
So so I mean, it's nice to have a little link down here. You can actually click, and then, so if I click on a preview. So this is what it looks like. So you click on About Me, and it's got all that fun stuff. Oh, I don't know what happened there.
These are the standard performance issues when you have to demonstrate it in front of 30 people. Yep.
But here's the interesting part. So I use the Trailhead to build this out, and then you hit the Publish button. I publish it. But when I publish it, those tiles disappear. All I have is, it looks like this. So in the Experience Builder, when I look at the preview, whenever it shows back up, it had those tiles there. But I hit publish, and even in preview, it is there. But when I hit publish, they go away. Do you have any idea why that is? Does anyone call know why it is?
Yeah, let's open it up. Anybody have any thoughts before I give my my idea here? Anybody? Okay. Anybody have any thoughts as to why they wouldn't be showing up there when you're actually looking at the published site, but it is there in the preview?
Icons aren't on the published site?
No. So see, like
it's
this
not public. It's not a public icon or link, that deal.
I think that's what it is. I went down here to settings. There's a spot that says make public. I guess don't need to have a sign and log in. Everything I have is as far as I could tell was public. Like I said, in the preview it's there, but when the publish button, they all disappear, and it's just this quick links in this part right here.
So I am scrambling to try to get my Experience Builder to load right now because the mtofficehours.com, that is an Experience Cloud site, and I had the exact same issue with the image that's in like the top background, and I know I figured out the solution for it, but I'm going to try to see if I can find this. But it definitely was a security related issue on the site itself. That was the problem, or it was the security related issue for the image as I was using it. So that's a question. The images themselves, like the icon images, where are you hosting them? Is it in like the CMS thing, or is it on like?
Yes, like, well, I loaded them up. So like if you click on it, you just I uploaded them from Google Drive and upload them into here. So last time I was talking, I crashed my site because I had too many icons.
Mm-hmm.
But when I downloaded them as JPEGs, they're a lot smaller, and so I was able to get all of my icons in here, all my pictures in here, and not screw it up, and it still function. And I got them off of the free site, so it shouldn't be passing any kind of license agreement type stuff. So,
yeah,
like I said, again in the preview, like they'll show up just like that, and that content thing goes away, looks nice, looks clean and crisp. But again, when I go to the published site, those icons disappear.
Bill, I have a quick question about that.
Yeah, good, Dan.
Under the profile, does the guest user profile have access to those images? Under
As far
settings?
as I know, and I say
go-
as far as I know, because in in the setup of the trailhead, they just said you go in there and you put in there, you didn't have to have like a guest profile. So
The
I mean,
guest, you gotta have a guest user profile and it has to have access to documents.
So on that settings page where you just were, there's where it shows the guest user profile. You can click on that link down at the very bottom.
this one right here.
Yeah, the profile, Anthony, where it says down your name at the very right, at the
Okay.
very bottom.
Anthony, yeah.
Yeah, click on that. And then that gives you access to the profile itself, and you might be able to, I'm not sure, but
I'm pretty sure I went through this about a month ago. It's gotta have documents, access to documents. I'm trying to find all my notes and made an index card, everything I went through.
Yeah, you're smarter than me, Steve, because I fumbled over this for like a day and a half, and then when I finally figured it out, I just kind of like sigh of relief and then moved on to the next thing. At least you took notes.
I made notes. My thing is finding them.
All right, so
There's
from
a
here,
guest user license, right? So that'll be what
Yeah.
we're talking about.
It's it. See what the documents, if he has access to the documents.
That would be further down here, right? I'm
Yeah,
a
this
little new
is-
with this.
yeah, this is the old profile view. So if you just do a Control F, like a find, just type in documents, and hopefully that'll get you close. And you might, just to save yourself a step, you might just want to click Edit right from here before you even do the search. And you're saying that he would need edit access to the documents object. Is that what it is?
Right.
Okay. So yeah,
Uh,
yeah, Anthony, I was going to say, go ahead and click Edit on the profile, and then we kind of go from top to bottom.
Yeah, there were like 3 things I did. That was the first one. I'm looking for the other 2.
All right, and then scroll all the way to the bottom as far as you can go. And then scroll up a little bit. You'll have all the objects that are available at the bottom here. One of them should be documents, I guess, if you scroll up a little more. There you go.
Right there?
Now, yeah, what are those 2 things? I'm guessing one is read and one is
Read
edit.
access. Mhm.
Okay.
read.
So just for fun, maybe we save the profile here and then go back and take a look and see if that had any effect. And then I was not a big fan of it, but I would also suggest, not a big fan of it at first, but now that I start using it, I don't think I could ever go back. But enabling that new profile interface, I think is actually pretty convenient. I really like it.
I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah.
Enhanced profile.
Yeah, well, I'll show you. I'll walk through an example of that after we go through
Okay.
this.
So if we go back to the home.
Yeah.
Fresh. That's
Now, I
it.
would- Yeah.
Look at you.
Unbelievable.
Now, if you're storing them outside of CMS, there's some other things you need to do. Like if you just pull them out of the asset
Mhm.
in the files location, you got to do some other things. But if you got them in CMS, I think that's what you need to do.
Awesome. Thank you very
Nice.
much. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
Nice work, Steve. Very good.
That was driving me insane.
All right. Now let me. Okay, while I'm going through this, Caitlin, do you have a question on this or a new question altogether?
New question.
Okay, so before we jump to your new question, I just want to show one quick thing based on what we were just talking about. So if I can log in, let me go to. Okay, Trailhead. Okay, so what I want to show is basically just the difference between this new, the old school profile interface and then the new school profile interface, and then show you the new school interface as well, which just got released recently. So I'm going to do this. Let me share my screen and walk you through this real quick. Okay, so these are my playgrounds. I'm just going to launch Creative Goat. And let's go into, from here, we're going to go into setup. And I'll show you this real quick. So, all right. So if you go into setup, now this is a part where I'm going to fumble around a little bit to try to figure out where the setting is. I think it's under user interface settings, but let's just take a look. So if I go to profile, I believe that I have the new profile management set up in this. I think that's the new default now when you create an org in Trailhead. So for example, if I were to go into the system administrator profile, let's see what displays. Okay, actually, no, this is the old one. All right. So this is the old interface where it's just like this giant page of page layouts and field level security and tab access and system permissions and all this stuff just dumped on one single page. If that's the view that you have right now, what you can do is over in the quick find, type in user interface settings. Is that what it is? Let's try that again. Settings. I think it's user management settings. Something like that. Let's see. Theme.
There's a separate like user interface underneath the user interface drop down, Bill. Might be in that.
Is it? Oh, I think I just saw it. There you go. User management settings. Okay. So when you go in here, and you, first of all, when you come in here, one thing to do is kind of look at everything that's in here because there's a lot of cool stuff. But you'll notice one of the options here that I've currently disabled is enhanced profile user interface. All right, so I'm going to check that to enabled. And now if we go back to our profiles and I scroll back down to my system administrator profile, you'll see this new and improved interface. So now you land here and it gives you a list of all the different sections like object security, Apex class access. And then, for example, if you want to add access to the documents object, I would be able to click into object settings, go to the documents object. And now from here, you can adjust everything about the documents object in one place. So whether they can see the tab, what fields they have access to, all that stuff right from here. All right. Now this, I'm actually kind of curious as to why none of this is editable, but we'll shelf that for a second. The other thing I want to show, just since we're talking about user interface settings, is how when you create a new field, it gives you that page where you can assign it to a profile. There's actually like a new thing that was released relatively recently that I want to make sure that you're aware of. So if you go in here and I create a new date field, for example, and I say test, go in here. All right, so you're all familiar with this page when you land on this, where it gives you a list of all the profiles. Well, in the new world, profiles eventually are going to be going away, or some, portion of them are going to be going away and be replaced by permission sets. Well, what you can do, if you go into that user management settings again, there's an option somewhere down here. Let's see where it is. Here we go, right here. So field level security for permission sets during field creation. So since I found this as an application vendor, this is actually pretty awesome because now everything I want to do is in field sets. So when I create a field, I can immediately add it to whatever field sets that I want. Not field sets, I'm sorry, permission sets. So here, if I create a new field and I go to date and we go and I type in test again, what you'll notice is that the next page that gets displayed now is a list of all of my permission sets, and I can actually specify which permission sets and what level of access that I want to add for each of them. So pretty cool. If you deal with permission sets instead of profiles. So okay, so I'll stop my share. Any final questions on that before we move on?
Would that
Right.
profile for system administrator, that's a standard profile, and you may not be able to edit those fields unless you clone it?
Great point, Greg. Yep, that's exactly right. So if it was a custom profile, then those document fields should have been enabled for me to edit. Great point. Okay. Any final questions there before we move on? All right, now I think we might have lost Caitlin. I know she had her hand up. All right. All right, so that's it. We'll open it back up then. Anybody have any other questions or topics that they would like to go through?
Bill, I've got one if there's no one else.
Sure. What do you got, Matt?
Okay, so I don't have it on this computer, so I'll try and explain it. It's more of like a thought exercise, I guess, of how to solve this. So I'm trying to use Salesforce surveys. And if you've used Salesforce surveys before, it uses a thing called an invitation, and the invitation is triggered by an update to a pick list. So basically, pick list value changes, it automatically sends an invitation with an email template. And so the concept that I'm trying to do is a case gets closed. And when the case is closed, it is sometimes going to send the survey and sometimes it's not. And the decision of whether or not to send the survey also involves the contact that's associated with the case.
Mm-hmm.
So the sequence is I update something on the contact, I close the case, and then I conditionally trigger the email.
Yep.
And it's all working in a flow, except that if the flow updates the field, it won't trigger the email. It has to either be done manually or with a before save flow. Like you can't use an after save flow or it doesn't trigger the invitation. Everything works perfectly if you do it manually or with a before save flow. But I can't use a before save flow that also involves another object, because before save can only be done on like the object itself. So I can update the case with a before save, but I can't update the contact and that.
I wonder, well, let me, anybody else have any thoughts before I just kind of throw random ideas out there? Anybody work with surveys?
Not surveys specifically, but a lot of times on record triggered flows, it has that. If you're ever running like the debug, it'll say it's ready for update at the next like element or something like that. So it's like, even though you have that update thing, it's like you have to have something else in between that update and whatever you're trying to do, so that it's either calling that, or I believe you can do, because I know I've run into similar issues with other things. I know that there's a way to like store that new information, so then you also have that, and then you can use that to make sure it sends.
Well, yeah, I was kind of thinking too, like I don't have a lot of experience with surveys, but I'm just trying to think if this was an issue that I was being presented with, regardless as to what it was, that final step you wanted to do. Two things kind of come to mind. I wonder if in the record triggered flow, if you're updating the field in that exact flow, I wonder if you had like a checkbox as part of the flow itself called like, should we send the email? And if you're setting the field to whatever the value is that should trigger it, then you set that checkbox to true. And when you're trying to determine whether or not you're going to send the email, that's what you're looking at. So in other words, instead of looking directly at the field, you're looking at that, that checkbox. The other thing I would say is,
I actually did that exact thing. So I basically, the flow right now, in a perfect world, it would go update the contact, determine whether or not this was a case that was worth sending a survey, and then update the field that triggers the survey.
Yeah.
And that flow works, but it doesn't actually, it even updates the pick list, but it doesn't send the survey. And so I replaced that updating the pick list with updating a checkbox to true, like you just described. And then I did a separate flow that was a before save flow just on the case, where it's basically like, if that checkbox gets checked, then update the pick list. So I kind of tried to do it as like a pair, but when you pair a before save and an after save together, like if you kind of monkey them together, it behaves as if it's an after save, if that makes sense. So like it's because it's still counting the after save. It's like doing the before save at the end of the after save, so it still doesn't send the invitation.
Interesting. What if you added the invitation to the asynchronous part of the flow? So in other words, you do all your field updates in like the real-time synchronous trigger, either before or after, and then you have that, in the flow in the start, you have that included in the asynchronous thing. If you put the email there, but don't just send the email there, but actually have the check there, like if the field is this, then send the email. I wonder if that would work.
I haven't tried that, but I will. That's a great idea.
The other thing I was thinking of, because how you can sometimes like set information in a variable. So it's like, or so if you assign that, it's like you're updating this record, did this record get, assigned, kind of have that decision element in there. How did this thing get updated, and what did it meet these things, and then send it.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it is. I mean, it's a good idea. That's kind of how it's set up. And it actually does update the pick list field that should trigger the invitation. It's just that, and I don't know if it's like a known thing or, I didn't find the documentation, but like if it's updated by the flow, it does not send the trigger. It does not trigger the invitation, even if it updates the field correctly.
Is it a separate flow that is it within that flow that's supposed to, when it is supposed to send, or is it part of something separate?
Well, so the Salesforce surveys has like its own like components, and an invitation is like part of Salesforce surveys. And there's not like a whole lot of options. You basically say, what is the thing that triggers it? And it has to be a pick list field, and it has to be a single value. There's no like complex logic. So it's literally like, when this field gets updated to this value, send it. And it is updating that field. So like it's meeting the criteria. It's just not actually sending the invitation unless it's done manually or with a before save flow. And then it does work correctly. Which is bizarre.
Yeah.
So many bizarre things that we encounter, right?
Yeah. It's like there's like 8 components to the business logic, and I can get any 7 out of 8, but if I check all 8 boxes, like there's always like one thing that makes it not.
Well,
No.
one final option, and this definitely might be in the realm of over engineering this completely, right? But if you go through all those steps, and the last step is to actually send the email, I wonder if instead of having that last step of sending the email, what if it was the last step was creating a platform event, and then you have your flow running off of the platform event to actually send out the email? So in other words, like completely separate that email thing out of the business logic and have it just log the platform event sends the email.
And can you do that for a field update? Because it's not like a send email action. It's not like an action of send email. It's really just a field update.
Okay. So you don't actually have like an element in there that says send email. It's literally just you're updating the field. Okay, so that's the part I was missing.
That comes from the like Salesforce surveys like component.
Okay. Yeah, I honestly don't know, except to say, and again, I'm kind of fumbling here, but like if everything is working except that piece where you're sending an email, I wonder if you can have all of your logic in there, and then same thing, either that asynchronous block or, again, over engineering, create a platform event that the only thing that's happening in that platform event flow trigger is setting the field. So in other words, all the updates, all the other stuff you need to do is in the flow that you have now. And then that final step, either in the asynchronous block or that flow related to a platform event, is just to check that one field, and that's it.
It's worth a try for sure.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
Well, thanks everyone for jumping in, and I saw some thoughts in the comments too. So good stuff for me to try out. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and as always, if you do kind of figure this out, I would love to hear how you did it in one of our next calls.
Absolutely.
All right. Any other questions or thoughts on this before we move on?
I just went through a clicks flow team sprint, but we didn't cover Salesforce surveys. So I just did a 32-page document of the things that I developed and presented during the 4 or 5 weeks flow, but didn't get to Salesforce survey.
Yeah, is Salesforce surveys a paid add-on, or does everybody get that with like Sales Cloud?
It's free for like a very limited version of it. So it's 300 survey responses a month, which actually for a lot of companies is plenty. So you get 300 free a month, and then you can do templates, but you can't do certain things like the surveys. You can't do merge fields in the actual survey itself unless you get the paid version. And then there's a bunch of like the reporting is like very, very, very basic out of the box, but you can pay for like the better reporting and stuff like that.
So for example, in the free plan, if I wanted to make it so that every time a case is closed, it would send a survey to the customer. It would say like, hi, I know you had like an engagement with Resource Hero, like tell us how we did. But if I wanted to get, say, hi, Jim, I noticed that you had a case number 1234 with like this subject that's now complete. Like if I want to do those kind of merge fields, that has to be the paid version.
Well, so that you're actually getting very close to my real scenario. So the actual template itself can only use fields off the contact or the lead. You can do the leads and contacts.
Yeah.
And so that's why the case has to update the contact, because a contact could have multiple cases. And in order to be able to identify what is the current case that I'm sending the survey for,
Yes.
I have to somehow relate it to the contact. So that's the first part of the flow at the point of closing it. And then then you can stamp on anything from the case, right? You could do the subject, you could do the case number, anything like that,
Yeah.
and include it in that. But that template is a little different than what I'm talking about. I'm talking about on the actual survey questions. So like if you wanted your survey question to be like, how did you feel about your experience with so-and-so on insert, last modified date, or something, whatever.
Yeah.
That kind of merge field and the actual survey questions themselves, you need a paid version of. But
Okay.
you can usually work around it without merge fields. Like you can say like, how would you rate your experience 1 to 5, and even with the free version.
Gotcha. Yeah. So now I'm starting to wonder, like, is this whole thing where you can't update the contact and send the survey? Is it like purposely done just to prevent you from like getting that workaround for the paid product?
Well, it's funny because like if you look at the trailhead for it, it actually is like almost exactly the same scenario as what I was saying. But like, let's say that your criteria was just, I'm going to send it every time the case is closed. Well, closing the case is a manual step done by the user, right? So not a flow, in other words. So I close the case, that's a pick list value. I updated the pick list value to the value it needs to trigger the survey. It works perfectly. Free out of the box version, it works perfectly. So if you were going to send it to every closed case, it would totally work. But if you were going to send it to only specific closed cases that need logic to determine whether or not you're sending it, and then you're updating that field in the background, then now it's a flow updating it instead of a person updating it. Therefore, trigger not working.
Yeah, just curious, how for a given contact, is it often that they have multiple cases that are live at the same time, or is it usually like one case that they're going to receive a survey for, and then once that's in the past, they might get another one in the future? Like, is there a possibility that somebody might have like 3 cases that are up in the air that are going to be sending?
That's a great question, and that's kind of my proposed solution to them, is to basically, instead of waiting until the case is closed to update the contact, anytime the case is modified,
Yes, that's where I was going to go with it. Yeah.
So that it's always already there. And then you could run a before save flow that only touches the case record itself, and that would work. And that, to me, that's like if I can't find anything better, that is the solution. So yes, if that's where you were going, I think that's probably the best bet. Unless these other ideas that people have thrown out and yourself work, which I'm hopeful for.
Well, like I said, keep us posted. This is actually a good point that before we go into the next question, I see we have one hand up, but when I say keep us posted, I'm hoping that you might be able to do that through our Slack workspace if you're not already a member. And what I'll do is I'll throw it into the chat here. This is the invitation to join our Slack workspace. All right, so we have channels for each of the Military Trailblazer office hour sessions, to include our Monday off the record chatter, Tuesday for Trailhead Tuesdays, and then David's Wednesday career branding session. So if you're not already a member, I hope everybody can join there. Okay, yeah. So Steve, I see you have a hand up. You have a question?
I do. Actually, I'm curious to see if anybody else has run into this and has any idea why it would happen. I'm a big fan of the Flow Trigger Explorer. Be able to go out and to pick the object that I want, and then see all of the flows that are related to it, whether it's before or after and whatever else. So I love that. Well, I ran into a situation yesterday with a client where they have an object that is from our application, and they want things done a little differently. So they have a separate field that gets calculated based on the existing value in another field. Well, I said, okay, clearly this has got to be being updated with a flow. So I went to the Flow Trigger Explorer, and there's nothing there. Update, create, delete, nothing there. And I thought, okay, well, that's odd. Maybe it's in Process Builder or something else. But I thought, all right, well, let's go back and see. Let's go look at the actual field and then go to the button that says, where is this used? And so I did that, and guess what comes up? A flow, a record triggered flow.
An active
Unlike
record triggered flow.
an active record triggered flow. It's like,
But I bet the one that triggers it is not that particular object.
Nope, it was that object.
Was it?
Yep.
Because the issue I've been having is that I'm trying to update this case stuff, but there are other record triggered flows that will create a case within that flow. So those ones do not show up if I try to use the Trigger Explorer for case. So if I'm creating a case in another flow that's triggered by a different object, those ones do not show up in that list.
yeah, and that makes sense.
But it's annoying because if I want to know
Right.
everywhere that a case is being created, like I can't use where is this field used on any standard fields. So how do I find all the flows where a case is being created if it's within other flows? So I know I've had that issue.
Sounds like they're
Manual
working out the
one.
bugs of that thing.
It's something.
Because it
I
is
don't know.
relatively new, right? The Trigger Flow Explorer.
It's been out for at least a couple of cycles, I think. But yeah, and I'm a big fan of it because it makes it. We have clients that have seemingly, hundreds of flows, and trying to. Yeah, I'm getting better at sorting the list to see, what's the triggering object, that kind of stuff. But I find it a lot easier to go to the Trigger Explorer and be able to find it from there. But I've never seen one where it was missing.
Until now.
Directly related.
Yeah, it's definitely concerning, right? Because it's, a lot of times when you're on a call with in any kind of consulting engagement where you want to try to see what's happening on a particular object, I rely on that now. I go to a Flow Trigger Explorer and I look at, whatever's in there. And the fact that we found one that was active running on that object, but it wasn't in that list, definitely concerning. So yeah, I don't know. Nobody else has run into this before? I think maybe we're stuck with logging a case with Salesforce to see what's going on there, but we can collectively hold our breath on that. So
I've had it with 2 objects with the same name before. So if that's a possibility.
interesting. Yeah, I don't think that we looked at that, Steve, to see if there was another object with that same name.
I'd be
All right.
surprised if there was, but yeah, I will definitely check that out. Thank you.
We got a couple clients, and then we replicate some objects so we can use more platform licenses to save them on license cost. So we've got occasionally we've got the standard object and then the custom one which we're rebuilding. So
it's a good thing that my Salesforce terms of service is holding my desk straight right now. I can't reference to see if that's an issue or not, but
if you're allowed to make 10 custom objects, Bill, I'll make 10 custom objects.
Right. Steve, that it kind of makes me wonder now, because I think that might have been a customer that had a resource object, and there was 2 there. So now I'm wondering, did they try to manually create their own resource RAID, and that was the problem? So yeah, it's definitely worth looking into to see if it was the same name. And there's other places within the platform that you run into issues with same name, API name between a managed package and a regular thing, field names, where if you have some logic that's going to run off of in your code, it says, grab me the updater field. So you have your namespace __updater, But then the customer creates another field in that same object called updater, which is perfectly valid because one's got a namespace, one doesn't, and they're different API names. But in the logic, like in your code, sometimes that can cause havoc because it just doesn't know which one to grab. So yeah, I wonder if it has something similar to that with same name, one namespace, one not. Worth looking into. So yeah. All right, cool. Awesome. Anybody else have a question? Greg, I see you have a hand up.
Yes. On flows, how would you do a before trigger?
Yeah, I can show you that real quick. So if I go to share my screen, back in my playground here. So if we look over on the quick find and we look for flow, when you create a new flow, I think it was already there, wasn't it? All right, so when you create a new flow, it's going to ask you what type you want to create. So you would select record triggered flow. And then when you click create, the first thing that's going to present you with is the, where you select which object, when you want it to run, all that stuff. Now, it doesn't say before and after, but what it actually says here is fast field updates and then actions and related records. This is the before, and you can see it actually there. So it runs before the record is saved. And then over here is it runs it after the record is saved. Biggest thing to keep in mind there, besides performance, like if you're running this logic to only update the same record that triggered the flow in the first place, before is really good because it'll actually do it before it tries to commit the record. You get a performance boost there. It doesn't cause like other flows to trigger based on that change that you made in the flow. Really good. But the thing to keep in mind here, I'll let me just select one. So created or updated before. What you'll notice here is that if we try to add an element here, you'll notice that the options that are available to you are a little bit limited, right? Like you notice here that there's no create element or there's a bunch of other ones that should be here, like delete records. They're not here. So you're limited on what you can do in that before triggered flow. Now, if I were to go in here and change that to the actions and related records / after triggered flow and click done, now when I click on this plus, you'll notice that there's a few other options available, like create, delete, things like that.
Right.
So yeah, that's how you would do it. Yeah.
So if you're writing an Apex trigger and you do a before insert and you discover an error, so you use the add error to the field.
Yeah.
Which would then go back to the page layout or whatever.
Yeah.
Can you duplicate that in your before trigger in a flow?
I don't think so. I don't think there's well, folks can correct me if I'm wrong, but would that be the equivalent of like an add fault option within Flow? Like I've never been able to replicate that exact functionality between Apex and Flow, that if you want to stop everything right then and there, you can just add the error and it just prevents the user from moving forward. Anybody have any experience with that? Like I said, I know there's you can add a fault line for something that if it fails, it goes in a different direction. But I don't think that in the flow, you yourself can say, this is a bad condition. I want to throw an error on this. So yeah, I don't think you can do that within Flow.
So we'll continue to write before triggers.
Yeah, no, there's probably ways you can work around this. And again, this gets back into the over-engineering space for a minute, but you can imagine a situation where you create a validation rule that says, hey, you can't do that. The validation rule is based on a checkbox field, right, that you create on the same object. And then in your record triggered flow, if you get to a point where you're like, hey, we want to throw an error right now, check that field to be true. And then it'll cause your validation rule to fire.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
You.
Yeah, so that could be a way to kind of work around that. All right. Caitlin, I know you had your hand up a while ago, so my apologies for not getting to you earlier. But yeah, do you have a question you want to go through?
Yeah, no worries. I actually had to drop. My boss wanted me to do work, some crazy thing,
Yeah, crazy.
So I have been playing around with this DLRS. I think that's the correct acronym.
Yeah.
And I'm running into an error and I have no idea, one, what it means or how to even start troubleshooting it.
Sure.
So if I could share my screen and
Yeah,
just show
absolutely.
you the error, I would be forever grateful.
Yeah.
So let's this one, I think. Sorry, I don't typically use
Zoom. Yeah, if
Yeah,
you move
I'm
your,
trying
if
to
you
figure
wiggle your
out.
mouse around, there should be like a green button at the bottom that says share screen.
Okay, I think it's, are
There
you
you go.
seeing the
Yep.
screen?
Okay, exception, can't insert update, execution before insert, null pointer exception, attempt to dereference a null object, test trigger. Okay, so as part of DLRS, when you want to have like a real-time trigger, or a real-time calculated rollup field that you're going to create, one of the requirements is that you create a test and a test class on that particular object that you're trying to create the rollup either for or from, right? I have seen situations where objects have certain types of logic on them, maybe required fields or something else in there that when you create a record, let's go to required field option. So when you create a record, you have to fill in a field. At the database level, it's a required field. You must do it. If you look at the test class that they have here, if you scroll down just a little bit here, they don't have any of that built in, right? They're basically just trying to create a record with the defaults set for each field. And that's just a very basic test there. So if in your environment you have some kind of requirement that says you must populate this field, you might have to create a custom test class. You might have to add that logic in there in order for the test class to be able to be deployed successfully. That's what I was thinking is the issue. The other thing that we can do here is if you click on the gear icon on the top right and go into setup, and then on the far left in the quick find, look for deployment. Type in the word deployment there. And if you look at deployment status, so anytime you're trying to deploy changes into an org, whether through a change set or metadata API, whatever it is, it should log the details here. So maybe this is related to what you were doing here. So if you click on view details for one of those failures there, I wonder if that would
this
give
is
us
all
any.
the same thing.
Yeah, I wonder if it would give us any more information here, or if it's going to give us the same error. Yeah, CTMS, stack trace, DLRS, test trigger. Yeah, so I kind of wonder the object that you're trying to deploy DLRS on. What is the name of the object?
The parent or where we're collecting the information from.
Yes, both
Okay.
of those. Yeah, what are
So
they?
the parent is the clinical study, but I think it's called program, like the actual API. And then the other one is site visit.
Site visit.
So yeah.
Okay, site visit. Now I'm curious on the site visit object. What are the required fields on that site visit?
I would have to pull it up real quick.
Like if you were to go to, and again, sharing and being this, posted to YouTube and everything else, if you need to stop share just to pull up a record, if it's a, something.
Yeah, I have it on my
personal.
other screen. So the only required field. Oh wait, I know this wrong one. Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Are visit method, visit status, visit start date, monitor, and reviewer. So there's quite a number of required fields.
Okay. So one thing that you could try here, just to see if you can get a little bit more information about what's throwing this error, on the quick find again, if you type in debug logs, you just type in the word debug and get you close. It's the one at the bottom there. Yeah, so if you create a debug log for whatever user that you're logged in as right now, so you basically create the debug log, try the deployment again, and then the hope is that we try to capture the debug logs where it might give us more information. Are you familiar with debug logs?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so right in the center of the screen under the top section, there's a new button there. So if you select new, and then for the traced entity name, just start typing in your username and then click on the little search icon there. And that should get you close to there, and you can select it. And then for the debug level, just hit the search icon. And there's a default one there that says like dev something another, SFDC dev console. Let's go with that guy. Okay, and then click save. Okay, now let's go back in the DLRS and try that exact same operation that you were doing. And if you can hear my dog barking, my apologies.
Can't hear anything, so you're good.
Okay, good. It should take just a second here. Now, with 30 people looking at it and the debug log, wouldn't that be interesting if it just went through? You know?
I mean, I wouldn't complain.
Yeah, no, there's some ways around this. If you're not into the Apex world, you don't want to write test classes and go through that headache. Okay, good. So we can look at the debug logs. But just to finish that thought, there's a scenario in DLRS where on your rollup, instead of setting it as real time, there's an option there for developer or flow trigger or something like that, where if you have certain fields you have to populate before they can insert a test record, you can basically skip this whole trigger part and just do it through flow. And then you can set whatever you need. But yeah, let's go to your debug logs tab and then click refresh. And let's just take a look and see if it captured a debug log. Okay, and then if you scroll down, let's click on the view for that one that's got the big long error there. Yep. Okay, and then if you scroll, this is probably going to be a very long file, but if you scroll all the way down to the very bottom here, maybe a little bit higher, scroll just a little bit. Let's see if it says anything different here. So insert failed, attempted dereference. Scroll up just a little bit more, like above. Yeah, keep going, keep going, keep going. Okay. And then just scroll up to the top here. Okay, yeah, my gut tells me that there's a required field that trigger is not populating, or a required field that doesn't have a default value. I think that's what the problem is. So I think the best way to get around that, I think, is instead of sending it to that the real-time trigger, if you don't want to write Apex code, would be to go the flow route. And I'd be happy to schedule a time if you want to go through that together, setting it up for the first time.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. Because I can't figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, so let me do this. I'm gonna find you in the chat here and shoot you my email address, and then just let me know what your availability is, and we'll schedule a time.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. All right, sorry we couldn't solve that right then and there, but like I said, DLRS, the test class, the default one that they create is very basic, and if you have any kind of weird validation rules or required fields or other things in place, they don't know how to handle that. So you have to do it manually, either in the test class or bypass it altogether and just use DLRS through schedule trigger or record triggered flows.
Okay.
So,
Well, thank you so much.
yeah. Nancy, I see you have a hand up.
Yes, I have a quick question. One of my salespeople asked if there is a way to merge contacts when Salesforce has not recognized that they are duplicates, other than manually recreating it as one contact.
Good question. Before I give you my take, anybody have any experience with this, merging contact records?
I think you just need to look at the matching and duplicate rules so that it gives the option to merge them.
But if Salesforce didn't indicate that it's a duplicate, are you saying I need to adjust the rules?
Well, so like how do you know it's a duplicate?
One of my salespeople said that they've been working on cleaning contacts up, and sometimes they come across two contacts that they know are duplicates, but Salesforce didn't trigger them as duplicates. And so
Right. So how do they, what is it about them that the rep identifies as a duplicate?
Like account name, contact name, that kind of thing?
Yes, I guess so.
I guess what I'd recommend, and of course anyone else jump in, but like taking one of those examples of where it's one that you guys know is a duplicate, but it's not getting caught by the current duplicate rules.
Right.
And making sure there's a matching rule that captures that scenario, the combination of name and email and account or whatever the thing is that makes them a duplicate.
Right.
Because the default matching rules for Salesforce are not always great. they work in some situations, but not all.
I asked him to screenshot the next time and send it to me so I can get a feel for that.
Yeah, Nancy, that was going to be my next question is how often does this happen, right? Because I think there's, going back to my previous points of over-engineering things, which I can do a lot sometimes. If this is like something that comes up once every 6 months, maybe it's just you do it manually and it's not that big of a deal. If it's something that happens all the time, exactly what Matt mentioned, where maybe look at the default Salesforce functionality for duplicate identification and that type of thing. But if that doesn't quite get you there, maybe there's a little bit more nuance to it where you can't build it out. There's probably an App Exchange app that, kind of a duplicate managing app that might be a better option. Internally, we had some very weird use cases where we know it's a duplicate, but it had more to do with like leads coming in and email addresses having like certain things appended to them, so it wasn't capturing them as duplicates. So we actually just built an Apex-based custom solution where we find the ones that we know based on the very weird criteria that we have, and then it merges them together, through Apex. But I mean, that's that might be too much just for, like I said, if it's like a once a month type thing, is it really worth it?
Yes.
And
All
of course,
right.
anytime you introduce any kind of custom logic, you're also introducing the potential for other issues as well. So there's always that to keep in mind. But I would say start with the Salesforce option, the duplicate matching, and the rules and things that are in Salesforce. If that doesn't get you there, look for apps that are on the App Exchange, and then worst case scenario, a custom solution.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? We have about 5 minutes left. Any quick ones? Sheba, I see you have a hand up.
Yeah, I was stuck on a super batch. It's on single sign-on. Should I share my screen?
Yeah, if you would like to, and there's nothing private that you don't want to have posted on YouTube, sure.
Do you see my screen?
I do. Yeah, single sign-on settings. Yep.
Yeah, and so this is the error. We cannot see we're able to successfully test login via single sign-on using Heroku web app. I did everything. It just doesn't work. And then I checked some developer, when I Googled the error and I checked the developer responses, it just says create a new developer org and do again.
Okay.
Also very twisted, give the same error again.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna I am not an expert on single sign-on in Salesforce. Does anybody have experience on this, or might be able to point Sheba in the right direction? Do me a favor if you can. Can you just click on that single sign-on settings you have down there, the test record? Can you click on that so we can just open up the details there?
This one?
Yeah. Okay, so it's just let's see. I was hoping that something might just jump out like an active or inactive. Ilya, I think you mentioned that this is something you faced in the past.
Yeah, I haven't solved it either.
Okay. So Sheba, if nobody on the call has any thoughts here, what I might ask you to do, can you put the link to this this badge in the chat, and then maybe if I can give it a go, I'll see if I get to that same thing.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, and let's just see.
So
Samuel. Okay. Yeah, so if you can post it in the chat, I'll give that a whirl. And if you're in our Slack workspace, I can shoot you a note there to see if it's something that I was able to address.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we just have a few minutes left. Anybody else have any last minute questions? Fritz, I see your hand up.
Yeah, hi Bill. I could if I could share my screen real quick, I
Sure.
can. So I'm not sure who it was who had the question about the duplicate contacts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you see my screen here?
Yes.
So if I have two contacts, like Andy Young, and let's say this Andy Young is with Dickinson, and then this Andy Young is blank, and I want to merge them because I know they're duplicates, I would just make them the same account and then save. So now I have them under the same account. I can go to Salesforce Classic, and go to accounts, go to that account, and under here, they'll both be together. I can merge contacts.
And then you can actually select which ones you want to merge manually.
Like the two, and then go next and then merge them.
So to kind of summarize that, as long as the contacts are part of the same account, if you switch into Classic, you can select whatever ones you want, whether they had the same first name, last name, doesn't matter. It could be Frank Peters and Peter Smith. You'd be able to check those and merge them and then select which ones you want to, which is the winner fields.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fritz, I think that's an awesome solution, but I always feel a little bad anytime that we have to go in the Classic to solve some problem in 2023. But hey, if it works, it works, you know. That's a great suggestion.
Cool.
As part of matching rules, you can determine how to treat blanks. And so you can, like, for example, if you're basically saying, like, I want these to match, but then you determine, like, what happens if like two of your three criteria match and the last one is blank on one of them, you can determine whether or not that counts as a match as part of the matching criteria.
Yeah, that's a great point too. I think what Fritz is doing though is the fact that it gets onto the same account, that allows you to use that UI in the related list.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but
That'll
yeah,
work out.
all good points.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, we have 30 seconds left, so I don't know if we have enough time for any more questions. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time, and it looks like Steven dropped off as well. I'm not going to be able to play Wonderball to play us out of the call for the week, but that is what it is. So if anybody has any other questions or thoughts, hit us up on our Slack workspace. Otherwise, I hope everybody has a great weekend, and we'll catch up next week. Thanks all.